This is History and Politics Chat at 4 o'clock on Tuesdays with me. I'm Heather Cox Richardson. I'm a professor of history. I do not speak for my employer when I do these videos. So I say that disclaimer today, but I want to add a different disclaimer because I want to talk today a lot about psychology and the psychology of politics and the psychology of being a person in a country where politics really matters right now. And I want to add to my disclaimer about for whom I'm speaking with a disclaimer that says I hold no degrees in psychology. I am not a trained psychologist. My understanding of psychology comes from literature, but also, and life, but also from the fact that I spent about 2 years studying psychology because I was interested in developing a theory of politics, a new kind of theory of politics, which is where my intellectual life leads. So I've read widely in the field, but I am completely untrained. So when I talk now about why politicians do what they do, I'm going to be talking in a way that makes it sound like I understand psychology. But what I am really doing is telling you what I've learned from what I have personally studied. So let me start here with the questions you asked. And I have to tell you, it is freaking me out a little bit that I can't see that anybody is here. So it feels very sterile to me on this side of the camera today. And I hope that resolves itself right now. Right now it hasn't. So the overwhelming question you people asked was Pompeo. What did Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just do when he said that there would be a smooth transition to a second Trump presidency? And again, I don't know. I wasn't in the room and I'm not Mike Pompeo, but I think if you watch that video or that clip, and it's widely circulating, watch the whole thing. It only takes about 20 seconds, not even 30, I don't know, something like that. I honestly think, from my perspective, that he was making a really lame joke. That is, there are certainly things that you and I can say to our close friends because we have a history together that we would never say in public because people would take them really badly. And the example that I came up with when I thought to tell you that was, I can go into a room that's full of my graduate students who've worked with me for years, and I can say, okay, put your books away, take out a pencil, we're going to have a pop quiz. And they will all laugh hysterically because they will know that there isn't a snowball's chance, where, that I would give anybody a pop quiz, let alone graduate students. And it would be a kind of commentary on how deep and involved our work has to be that we could do it through a pop quiz. I mean, there would be all kinds of layers to that. But if I did that in a classroom full of first-year students, at least one of them would break down in tears, and all of them would dutifully put down their notebooks and pick up pencils. So I suspect from what it sounded like and the kind of smirk he gave afterward that Pompeo was kind of talking to a room that didn't really, he wasn't really recognizing how that would play on a larger scale. And mind you, I am no fan of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And there are many places where he has concerned me deeply. One of the things I wrote about was when he gave a speech about how American foreign policy had to be Christian, that he was a Christian leader and he was taking America into a Christian role on the world stage. And that had red flags all over it for me. But what he said this afternoon is getting huge play, I know, but this is not something that strikes me as being anything other than, A, perhaps he was a bit of an idiot, but B, we all misspeak sometimes. And even if you don't like the guy, he's allowed to misspeak. But that's my take on that. So I hope I've put your mind a little bit to rest about that. So now here's the other piece that now we're going to dig deeper into this throughout today. And that is that, are we in the middle of a coup? And please bear with me here because I can't answer that simply. The answer is, and I don't mean to be flippant, maybe. In that, I think that one of the hallmarks of the Trump administration has always been to push the envelope and to see what he could get away with. And he's found he can get away with a heck of a lot of stuff that one would never have thought that a president could get away with, for sure. But there's some reasons that it will be very difficult for President Trump to really launch a coup. Now, we have had a coup in American history, and in fact, weirdly, today is the anniversary of it. I believe, off the top of my head, somebody could check it, except I can't see that anybody's here to comment on it. But in 1898, in in North Carolina, in Wilmington, North Carolina, there was a coup against a legally elected biracial government in which white supremacists came in and said, we don't care that you've been legally elected, although they had. We don't believe that you people should ever hold office, and you certainly never will again. And they kill a whole bunch of people and they replace them with themselves. And then they go to the newspapers and say, we're the best men in the community. And we are just the ones who really belong in those seats, not the people who were duly elected. And that actually happened not infrequently in the late 19th century, but usually less dramatically than that. And that's known as the Wilmington coup or the Wilmington riot. But that's a really big deal. That was literally a coup. And there's some other issues in the 1890s that look not unlike that, to be honest. And that's something to hold in your head, because I hope to end up around there today, although I'm absolutely winging it today, by the way. So it's hard to pull off a coup. It has been done, but it's hard to pull off a coup. And one of the things that you need is a very, very loyal group of people around you. And I'm going to hit that in a second. But the most important thing you need, first of all, is the military to be loyal to you. You have to have the power to take over the infrastructure of a country. And the American military has made it very clear that it is not going to back a coup by President Trump. That's why it was such a big deal last summer when the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, came out and said, we're not doing this. This is not going to happen. And then, if you remember, and maybe I didn't make this clear enough when I wrote about it, for about 2 weeks, one military leader after another came out with a statement about how they stood on the Constitution. They were not going to get involved in politics. And that was not them being political. That was them saying, there's no way we're gonna back any kind of a coup attempt or any use of the military against civilians. So right there, you're gonna have a really hard time launching a coup. Now, one of the other things that has to happen is there has to be some basis for, so you also need people who are fiercely loyal to you. And obviously Trump has some people in the administration who are indeed fiercely loyal to him. He's got a lot more who aren't. And for all that a lot of people are pretending to go along with him right now, there's an awful lot of people who are going to be relieved to see the other side of him, including a lot of Republicans, not because they like the Democrats, but because they recognize that he's an extraordinarily loose cannon, and that he's really in politics to enrich himself and his family, which, they don't have any problem with on one level, but on another level, it makes it very hard, for example, to do business, to really accomplish anything for your own gains if you constantly have to work around basically a narcissist who's only doing things in his own interest. Now, probably all of you have worked with a narcissist at some point, and it's possible to do it, but you can't really run a business when you don't know, when the success of the business is going to depend on whether or not somebody's mad at you that day. You actually need to have somewhat of a level playing field, or at least some way in which what the laws are going to look like the next day. So he's got a problem on that front as well, launching a coup. Now, another way in which there is a real problem for him is that this election was not close. You're seeing, if you are paying attention to the Fox News channel and right-wing media, and you're listening to the Republicans, they are making it sound like it is close. It is not at all close. That is, Biden is up by at least 4.5 million votes in the popular vote. That's more than 2%. I think it's more than 3%, but that's just off the top of my head, trying to do the numbers. So it's a lot. Somebody said today it was the highest margin in the popular vote since FDR. I have a hard time believing that, but the point is, it's a lot. And the sweep's going to be even bigger in the Electoral College. Remember, the voting is not done yet. I'm sorry, I totally misspoke. The counting is not done. The voting is very done. But the counting is not done yet. Those numbers are continuing to go up. And in the states that Trump is contesting, and I'm going to tell you more about the contesting in just a minute, the votes are not remotely close. They are 15,000, 18,000, 20,000 or more, far more than he won those states by in 2016, by the way. But when you have a contested vote, and a contested vote doesn't mean that there's two parties that fought heavily. A contested vote means that somebody says, this isn't fair. And normally when that happens, when there is a recount, the average recount runs about 180 votes, 180. That is a difference of 180 on average over the recounts that have been done in the last 20 years or so. That's nowhere near 10,000, 18,000. So realistically, this is a non-starter. Now, again, it'd be one thing if Al Gore had said in 2000, hey, wait a minute, we got a recount going on here. And every time we do a recount, my numbers get better and better, as they did in Florida with him. I think he picked up 1,200 votes in the beginning of the hand recount until it was stopped. At the end of the day, he was the difference in that election was under I think it was 527 votes. That's not a lot, especially considering that he won the popular vote. And that's something you can see going to your people and going, hey, this has been stolen. Trump is not on the losing side of a vote like that, the way Gore was, the way Hillary Clinton was, the way Grover Cleveland was in 1888, or the way Samuel J. Tilden was in 1876. He's lost, and this is going to be really hard to get over in the courts. And that's the next place where this is going to be a difficult sell as a coup. And that is that you are hearing again and again and again and again about how they are contesting the vote. In fact, there have been a number of lawsuits, and the Trump administration has had no evidence for their arguments in any of them. The courts have thrown out every single one of them, every single one, because there's nothing there. So, in order for the courts to say, oh, yes, you've got something going on, you have to assume that they're going to discover something nefarious, and I'm going to get to that in a second. There hasn't been any sign of it yet. Or you're going to have some court that is so corrupt that the judges are going to say, well, we don't care, there's no evidence, we're going to cheat. Maybe. There's certainly corrupt judges, but, you and I might not agree with a judge on one or the other side of the political spectrum, but judges who are willing to actively lie about what the evidence is, think about the news. Think about how often you read about that. There was that horrific case of that judge, I think it was in Pennsylvania, who was essentially selling young African-American men primarily, but men and women, into juvenile detention because he got a kickback from the guys who ran juvenile detention. That was a corrupt judge. How often do you read about corrupt judges? Every state has a bureau that does nothing but look for corrupt judges and to try and get them off the bench. So, maybe I won't say no, but it's certainly not happening in any widespread fashion now. As I say, these cases are getting thrown out again and again and again. And if you're interested, there's two places you can follow along with this. Mark E. Elias, M-A-R-C, not K, M-A-R-C-E Elias on Twitter is the person running the legal team for the Biden camp, or Steve Vladeck, V-L-A-D-E-C-K. Steve Vladeck is a law professor, I think at UT Austin. And he is also running down all these cases. And again, what's happening with these cases is they are going nowhere legally. So what's happening? What is going on with them? Well, what's happening is, once again, and this should absolutely not surprise anybody, because this is what Trump and the GOP for a while since Gingrich has done. They're feeding these stories to the media, because then the media picks them up and they freak out and they get traction, so that the more you hear it, and think about this, think of how upset you've been about hearing these cases, all of you. There's nothing there. But you think there is because you've heard it so many times. So and I'm trying to think of something that would bring this home. So I'm sitting here and there's a window across from me. I could sit here and tell you, and I could really do this up. There's a man at that window. There's a man coming into this window. And I could make you believe that, and you'd be frantic, and you'd write, and you'd get worried, and you'd call the police. There's no one at the window. Not even my tomato plant any longer. It died. But I could make you believe that by telling you that enough times. And that's what's going on here. The Trump administration is convincing people that there is something out there, and there isn't. This is what they've done with voter fraud, which I've talked about here before. That's something that enters the Republican lexicon in 1986, and they run with it in the 1990s to argue that this is the reason that Democrats are winning elections is because of voter fraud. There is no evidence of voter fraud. You are literally more likely to be hit by lightning today than you are to run into voter fraud. It isn't a thing, but people believe it's a thing. And what they're doing here now is trying to convince their followers, and I'm not going to say supporters any longer because I think they're followers, that our election systems are compromised. So now we saw the statistics last night, I think it was, that 7 out of 10 Republicans don't trust this election cycle. There's nothing wrong with this election cycle, but so what is going on? Why are they doing this? Well, a couple of things are going. So first of all, I'm sorry to go back. So in terms of a coup, what's the game plan here? And then let me go on to why that they might do this. So the game plan here is, I think as I outlined last night, Trump thrives on chaos. That's partly a sleight of hand, which I suggested last night, that when he gets us all screaming about something over here, he's often doing something else over here that is nefarious. And I am beside myself over this arms trade to the UAE. And I don't understand anything about arms trades, and I certainly am not going to pretend that I know how to fix the troubles over the centuries in the Middle East. But I do know that if members of both parties in Congress have overwhelmingly said they object to the transfer of arms to the UAE, so that in 2019, Secretary of State Pompeo, with the backing of President Trump, Trump's emergency declaration, transferred $8 billion of military technology to the UAE, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia under this emergency declaration over the will of Congress, that there's a problem. I also know that when the when the State Department Inspector General, who looked into that deal, was so appalled that the first guy got fired, that was Steve Linnick, and the guy who replaced him went ahead with the investigation and said, oh, we got a really big problem here. This was probably against the law, and it also opened us up to accusations of committing war crimes because we didn't do due diligence, and the weaponry that we provided to these countries went on to create a humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen. We got a problem. Like I say, I don't know who we should, believe me, I'm not going to get involved in that. It's not my field of expertise. Like I keep saying, I'm an Americanist, but I'm looking at this as an Americanist and an institutionalist and saying, when our administration is overriding what Congress people of both parties who are studying this say is in our national interest, I'm very concerned about it. And this transfer of technology appears to be, and mind you, again, I'm not an expert, I'm simply reading the papers, as I did the calculations last night, about $25 billion worth of technology that of course the UAE has wanted for a very long time, and this was Jared Kushner's baby. He's the one who really was supportive of this, and so I'm like, to me, I kept sitting there last night going, I don't get this coup thing. I don't get it. Like, what's going on? And I'm going to talk about the Senate in just a minute, but the pieces didn't add up, and honestly. Last night's letter, I had that written early because for the first time in a year, I was going to go to bed early, like before midnight. And then like at 10 o'clock, there's all the stuff about the coup and this happening and this happening. And I'm thinking, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. So I sat there for hours reading around and thinking, going, I don't get it. It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. So I made a list and I said, what happened today? Mark Esper's out. Secretary of Defense is out. I forget now off the top of the different things that had happened. I went, oh my God, this is about national defense. This is not about something happening domestically, which doesn't make any sense. This is about national defense. So when you wonder what he's up to, I don't know if that's the whole answer at all. It certainly fits Trump's MO that he would be creating chaos and doing something to make money in the other direction. That absolutely would be the case. I don't know the answer to that because, again, I don't have any super insights, but that might be one of the reasons that he is running with what is a ridiculous idea of this coup, that he is actually doing a lot of deals right now to see how well he can pad his nest going forward. As people have pointed out, the claims that for people to go ahead and that he's got to mount a legal defense, so people should contribute. If you look at the fine print on that, and it was the the Wall Street Journal that broke this story. I did talk about it in a letter at some point recently. If you look at the fine print on the emails that call for donations to his legal defense fund, according to that material, 60% of your donation goes, first of all, to retiring Trump's campaign debt, and 40% goes to the Republican National Committee. Now, if you donate so much that you go over the limits of how much it is legal to donate to those things, and I do not remember what those limits are, it's like $2,500 or $2,800 on one and $13,000 on the other, something, I don't remember. It's a lot of money. If you donate more than that, then what's left over will go to legal defense. Well, oh, come on, that's just a grift. That's just more of the same. So at some level, I think it is likely that Trump is simply trying to grab as much money as he can get out on the way out the door. But then there's also the point that people have raised, and that is then why is Mitch McConnell sort of signing off on this? Now, he didn't support Trump's idea that there had been something nefarious in the vote, but he has gone ahead and said, yeah, Trump is entitled to his day in court. And certainly other politicians have done the same. And I'll talk more about them in a second. But what's McConnell up to? And again, like I say, I have no inside track with McConnell, and this is observation. And to some degree, what Jane Mayer wrote about him in her New Yorker article this summer. And by the way, Jane Mayer is one of our very best observers of politics in the country, I think. I just find her, the simplicity with which she cuts through to the heart of everything is I don't miss anything Jane Mayer writes. Anyway, so the woman could write the phone book and I'd read it. What's Mitch McConnell up to? Mitch McConnell loves power, and Mitch McConnell is currently not only the majority leader in the Senate. He is a majority leader in the Senate who has amassed unprecedented power in that position. So he, in many ways, has become, since the Obama administration, more powerful than anybody else. In the government, he is stopping legislation. He is packing the courts. He, this one senator from the small state of Kentucky, is essentially the key power broker for the entire United States of America. In many ways, you could say he is the most powerful person in the world. Except this election means that the results of the election so far mean that the Democrats and the Republicans are evenly balanced in the Senate. Each side, including the two independents in the Senate, who are counted with the Democrats, they're caucusing with the Democrats at this point, they are evenly split, 49-49. So it's all coming, the control of the Senate is all coming down to the state of Georgia, which for completely bizarre reasons has 2 Senate seats that right now are going to go forward in a runoff. The state of Georgia has a law that says that if neither candidate gets more than 50% in an election, there will be a runoff. Both of the candidates who are running for the Republican Party, they're incumbents, both of them. But they are both very weak in different ways. So Kelly Loeffler is one of them. You may remember her. She was appointed to the position. She was not elected. She is the wife of the guy who runs the New York Stock Exchange. And she's the one who got in trouble for insider trading when she got a briefing on just how bad the coronavirus was going to be. And she and her husband, through their advisors, I'm not making a legal indictment here because that's not my role here. But they dumped a lot of stock in things that were going to be hurt badly by the coronavirus and bought a lot of stock in video technology, for example. So she's in weekly about that. She's also a QAnon supporter, and she is, she's not very good, is the bottom line. I mean, it was kind of a political favor to put her in there, and she's richer than God, which, is never a bad thing to have in your state for a senator because she's going to help with funding of races. So she was appointed by the governor. So she was already in a weak position, and she is running against a guy named Warnock, the Reverend Warnock, who is a really charismatic fellow. He's one of 11 children, and he has taken over the pulpit from at the Ebenezer church that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had. He's just a really charismatic guy. And he's a real competitor. So that's one race. And in the other race is a race that looks in many ways a lot tighter. But on the one hand, you have David Perdue, whose name I simply cannot spell. My poor copy editor has to change him away from being the chicken guy every single time I write about him. But David Perdue is, sort of a generic Republican big business senator, but he has had a number of run-ins with ethics boards over insider trading. And the guy who came up against him was a guy named Ossoff. The guy running against him is a guy named John Ossoff. And he is very well-spoken, very young. Of course, I'm old, so everybody looks like they're 12 to me. But he's young, and Perdue has done really vile things. Like last summer, he ran an ad that Ossoff is Jewish, and an ad that was really racist, stereotypically racist against Jews. And when called out on it, he kind of had to backtrack and say, it wasn't me, I had nothing to do with it. And it's his campaign. And he's the same guy who did the whole pretending that he didn't know how to pronounce Kamala Harris's name. I mean, he's really hitting the racist dog whistles. And in one of the last debates between Ossoff and Perdue, Ossoff just had this incredible moment. People were calling it, the Mr. Smith goes to Washington moment, or the West Wing moment, where he said, and I can't begin to do it justice, but he said, maybe you would have had more time to take care of your constituents if you hadn't been insider trading. And he just does this bang, 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 bang thing right off. It's about 30 seconds, and I'm certain it's on YouTube if you want to see it. And Perdue just goes, and he doesn't answer. He can't pick it. It's just like if you'd scripted it for a movie, it happened. I mean, it's every commercial everybody wants to have. And it was so brutal after that Ossoff wasn't angry or mean or anything. It was just like, it was a moment, let me tell you. But Perdue refused to debate him again. He canceled the future debates. He said, he went to his base. He said, I'm not going to reach out any longer. I don't need to. Well, so now the control of the Senate hangs on these two races, and it's not at all clear who's going to win. And this is in Georgia. Now, Georgia, who knows what's going to happen, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in play, including the fact that the governor of Georgia, Kemp, is it is famous for voter suppression, and that's maybe a story I don't really have time to get into, because I know you want me to stay at the national level right now. But this is why Stacey Abrams is such a huge deal, is because she ran against him in the Georgia gubernatorial race in 2018, and basically it looks pretty much like he cheated. I mean, he was the Secretary of State at the time, and he got to decide what votes got counted, and he actually won. But it was pretty clear that people had not been able to vote, and that's sort of been his hallmark. So what did she do? She went out and she started an organization called Fair Vote, and they signed up more than 800,000 new voters in Georgia. And if you're watching, you will see that Georgia has flipped to blue, in part because of what Stacey Abrams did, but also in part because of the fact that Atlanta is a growing city, and it's a growing city with young people, and young people are overwhelmingly Democratic. So McConnell is looking at all this, and he's thinking, oh crap, I got a problem here if I want to continue to be Senate Majority Leader. Because if he isn't Senate Majority Leader, what's the point? He's 78 years old. I mean, it's not like he's going to be Senate Minority Leader. He's going to quit. I mean, I don't know that, but it sure looks like it to me. At 78, why would you want to go to being second fiddle? So he was 78 last I checked. Maybe he had a birthday. He might be 79. I don't know. I haven't looked lately. But so if he continues to stoke that base, to continue for Republican voters to really think this is an election about Donald Trump, the people who turned out to vote for Trump, he's got a better chance than if he shuts up. If he shuts up and it just becomes a question of these two candidates, Perdue and Loeffler, they're just not going to turn out the vote the way Stacey Abrams and Ossoff and Warnock are. So that's probably why Mitch McConnell is going along with this charade. And it is a charade at this point. Now, then there's the other question of why other senators are doing so. And the ones who really stand out to me are Lindsey Graham from South Carolina and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. And I'm not going to speculate at huge length on either one of those. But I think that it is possible. It's important to remember these people aren't blocks. That everyone's different. They all have different interests. That's what politics is. That's why it's so interesting to me. It's like a chess game, like who's aligned with who, when, and why. And it's so much fun for me, not like this, but when you're trying to figure something out, and you see a new move, and you watch what someone's doing, and you think, oh, now I get it. That's going to move over. If you move this, it's why I like to write too. You move a word here, you got to add a word here, or you change a word over here. But I think it's worth thinking about people like Lindsey Graham and Ron Johnson in perhaps a different way than somebody like Mitch McConnell. Because Lindsey Graham went from being a hater of Donald Trump to being an absolute lackey virtually overnight. And that's worth speculating about why that happened. Ron Johnson has been very involved with people who have worked very closely with Russian oligarchs. And that perhaps has changed his opinion about the way American politics should work. So they might have personal reasons in which in ways that make them have decided that they have to go all in on Donald Trump right now. But I don't think any of them actually believe that there is anything that there has been any wrongdoing. So let me go down now some of the other questions you've asked. So what is happening here? So there's a smokescreen here. They're creating a reality the same way they created a reality with Hillary Clinton's emails, which were nothing. The same way they tried to create a reality with the idea of Hunter Biden doing something nefarious in Ukraine, which came to nothing. The same way that they tried to do something with Hunter Biden's laptop, which is to tell a story enough times that the news picks it up and everybody freaks out. All right, so let me tell you how this actually works. So people are like, oh my God, can the state legislatures change the electors and all this? So let me start by saying this is a dynamic process. So I'm going to tell you how it usually works. And I'm going to tell you where there could be changes to that. But before I get into any of that, remember who the people are that are doing this. These are we all know poll workers, right? I know at least 2 people who were working in the polls, and God bless them, because an awful lot of them have gotten, not my friends to my knowledge, but a lot of the poll workers have gotten sick with COVID. They did it because they love this country. Let's think about the people who count ballots. Like, they're our neighbors. They're people we know. We don't import somebody from, Iran to count our ballots. These are people we know. And do you know what? Some of them are going to screw up 1 or 2, I feel certain, because I certainly would if I were doing it. But more than one person counts them. That they have that there's safeguards built in there, because in this country we really take ballots seriously. So somebody wrote to me and said, "Bring it on! I could defend every single ballot in my district in Philadelphia." We were that careful. And at one point, if you remember, I think it was in Philadelphia, one of the leaders sent everyone home, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, how can you do that?" It's like, they've been counting for 14 hours. Like, they need to go home and have a Coke or a Pepsi or whatever. So these are people you know. This is not like some. You don't go away to counting camp. These are people we know. Now, what happens is at the local level, people count. They count the ballots, and they make sure that it's right, that they can stand by that, and they believe in the answers they've got. Those local ballots from your town go to the state, and somebody different has to certify that those are real. So I couldn't do it in my small town and basically bribe everybody to agree that, that I won an election. I could do that, but it would be a waste of my money, because then I would have to go to the state, and the people at the state, and it's in different, each state has, and the District of Columbia have a different system. So I can't tell you who actually does it at the state. It's a Secretary of State, or it's an elections board, or it's, there's different committees that could do it, but they're not the same people. So I have to now, not literally me, but if I were my local, town clerk or whatever, I would go to the state. I would literally take my paperwork to the state, and I would say, here's our ballots. And then there's either the Secretary of State, or the elections board, or different, as I say, different states do it different ways, have to look at it, and they have to say, oh yeah, we trust these numbers. And if they don't trust the numbers, they're going to ask me questions, and I got to go ahead and say, yeah, here's these tallies, and here's the proof of this, and here's the proof of that. I don't get to just go say, believe me. I actually have to have proof of what I'm doing. Then the states can go ahead and take their numbers, once they're certified, forward to the federal government, to the next stage. So the question is there going to be cheating at that level? Sure, there could be. There always can be. But it's so unlikely. Like, all of those people have to cheat along the way. And do you know what? I'll tell you right now, there's people out there who are cheaters in this entire system. But there's an awful lot who aren't, and they're going to outweigh the people who are the cheaters. So stop worrying about what's happening on the ground, because if there is cheating on the ground, it comes out. And let me tell you, I'm going to do a side trip here and tell you a little bit about that. So you may or may not have paid a lot of attention to what's happened with that whole idea of the United States Postal Service slowing down the mails, so that the mail-in ballots would not go in. That actually exploded on Election Day, when U.S. District Court Judge Emmett G. Sullivan, said to the Postal Service, get your hiney's in here and do a sweep of all of your facilities and make sure those ballots get in, because in a number of states, the ballot counting, if the ballot isn't in the day of the election, it's not valid. Other states, it's up to 3 days or 6 days, or some states it's like 3 weeks, I think, although I might be making that up. But that's for the military ballots, because the military ballots have always come in late. And the U.S. Post Office said, he's told me to do it first thing in the morning. And at 5 o'clock, after 5 o'clock that night, they said, "Now we didn't do it." They blew off a court order. And let me just tell you, if you ever get a chance, don't do that. I mean, you and I blow off a court order, we're in serious trouble. They blew it off. So Sullivan got furious, and he said, we're meeting in court tomorrow morning. And they did. They were in court the next morning, and he started asking questions about, hey, what's going on here? And they said, well, we did sweeps. We always do sweeps. And if we'd gone ahead and done what you'd asked us to, it would have messed up our systems. And he said, well, let's start seeing numbers. They said, well, we don't actually have numbers. And he's like, well, then you're going to produce them tomorrow. So then they went in the next day with what were the numbers. Now, those numbers have continued to come in, and there was a spreadsheet that came out this morning that I'll probably write about tonight. And it turns out that in a number of places, the mails were significantly delayed. And those places were, on my eyeball first glance, because it's a very long document, I'll cite it tonight if anybody wants to look, or you could probably Google it, although I don't know what the title, well, I could check the title if anybody wants. The places where the mail tries to deliver on time at about a 95% rate is their bottom. Usually they're actually quite good. They're usually 99%, but anything below 95% is, oops, we screwed up big time. And most of their ballots most of the ballots in the mail did in fact beat the 95% mark by a lot. Most of them were 98 to 99%. But Pennsylvania, way low. I want to say there were some numbers, the numbers there were definitely in the 80s, and there were some in some state, and I won't say it's Pennsylvania, it might not have been, it might have been Kentucky was the other one. Kentucky's numbers were quite bad as well. At least one of the numbers I saw was 62%. So the numbers, and again, I was just eyeballing it, were really bad in Pennsylvania, Kentucky, that's Mitch McConnell's state, right, where he was in a tight race, Illinois, and Texas. Texas was the other one. Now again, speaking of irregularities, so irregularities do come out. It's just that people tend not to pay attention after the election. That's a real issue. That's, if you're looking for issues about bad ballots, those people who voted on time, got their ballots in the mail, they were not counted because those ballots did not make it in time, depending on whether the state would count afterward. That I didn't correlate with what states counted when, but that's a problem. Okay, so things do, stories like that do come out. So there will be irregularities, but they would have shown up. Like those things from the USPS showed up. If you knew where to look, and that's the irregularity there is, we don't know how those people voted, obviously, but certainly the expectation was that mail-in ballots were going to be Democratic ballots and in-person ballots were going to be Republican ballots. So that's a big deal. All right, so let me see, where was I? So that's how the system works. It goes in. So could the state legislatures decide to send their own slate of electors? Technically, possibly. But once again, to get there, you have got to assume that everybody in Pennsylvania, everybody in the state legislature in Pennsylvania is corrupt. And that's a real heavy lift. That's a real heavy lift. So I really think that this is going to go forward. I really do. I think that the real issue was that Trump, I think, was trying to delay the certification of ballots until after December 1st, which is when they have to be forwarded to the states. And so far, he's had nothing. He's had zero success on that front, and we're in mid-November. So are those cases going to go forward? Maybe. I mean, things could always change. The guy could show up at my window. But right now, there is no reason to think that that is going to happen. All right. So so you had other questions, and let me go. I want to make sure I leave in the right place. So let me go here quickly into another area of this, and that is, so what the heck? You know, we have a legally elected president, and Trump is refusing to acknowledge him, and has refused to sign over the transition material. What the heck? Are we in real trouble here? People have asked whether or not Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have security clearances. Can they get briefings without Trump acknowledging all this stuff? Yes, they can. So here's the way this works. Security clearances are not for people like presidents, vice presidents, members of Congress. There is an assumption that if you are elected, that the people trust you. And so by the nature of his office as a vice president and then as a president, Biden had a security clearance. And similarly, this is why it's such a big deal that Trump, and as president, you can say who gets a security clearance. So Jared Kushner was not in fact cleared for a security clearance when he first went into the White House. They denied him a security clearance, and Trump overrode that. And because a president can do that, and he did. So Jared Kushner could not pass a security clearance, but he had access to our secrets. Biden will be okay. He can get the information he needs. What he's not getting is the president's daily briefing. And that's the most up-to-date threats to America. But here's where we are all in incredible luck. And that is that nobody knows this system better than Biden does. So one of the reasons that Biden is, I think, a really good person to have right now is he is an institutionalist, as I have just described myself. He cares about the institutions. He knows how the institutions work. And I have said way back when I was talking about Biden, I'm sorry, not Biden, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is not an institutionalist. He is somebody from the outside, and I don't mean that literally. He's been a senator since about 1776, but he is. He doesn't work within the system. His power base comes from grabbing power outside the system and bringing it forward and saying, you know, I'm bringing these new ideas, I'm bringing these new people, I need a hearing. And that's very effective as well. We need those people too. Biden is not leading a march anywhere. What Biden is doing is he is saying, let's work within the system. Let me make this system work. So what that means is that in a case where you have a president who is denying him access to the things that he needs, it's already in place. And when I say that it's already in place, The guy who was managing Biden's transition is a guy named Ted Kaufman. And Ted Kaufman literally wrote the law on this, on how to transfer from one presidency to another. He literally wrote the law. It's called the Kaufman-Leavitt Act, the Presidential Transition Improvements Act. So they know how to do this, and they know where the roadblocks are. And again, if you told me to make a new presidency in 70 days, I would be like, crap, I don't even know where to hire a secretary. But these guys know what they're doing. So in this case, we have totally lucked out by having an institutionalist in place there. And how is he handling this? I think it's really important to recognize, and this is where I wanted to talk about psychology. And that is that one of the things that Trump has always done so phenomenally successfully is to dominate the public conversation. He lives for this. He's a narcissist. This is what he lives for. It doesn't have to be good. He just has to be running it all the time. So what he does is he creates chaos, and then he steps in and creates a narrative, and everybody responds either positively or negatively. And Biden's not playing that game. Biden is simply going about his business, and he did this during the campaign as well. You know, Trump would bait him again and again and again, and he would ignore Trump, and it drove Trump crazy. And he's doing the same thing now. So he just did a press conference, I think it was what Biden did, where people said, what are you going to do about the fact he's not doing this and he's not doing that? And he's like, who cares? You know, I can do this. And what he's doing is he's sucking oxygen away from Trump and sucking oxygen away from him being able to control our narrative, our story. And I was trying to think again about how to put this today. And I thought about like being a parent to a 3-year-old, and some of you are teachers, you can do the same thing with a 5th grade boy maybe, right? And that's that you can't argue a 3-year-old out of a temper tantrum by getting down at his level and arguing with him about why he can't have candy at 11:30 in the morning when you're going to have lunch at noon. That lets him control the discussion, and there's no winning it because you've accepted that it might be a reasonable thing to do to have candy right before lunch. What you do in that case is you let him have his, you might try and comfort him. You let him have his temper tantrum, and you and the other kids go about making lunch and putting it on the table. And pretty soon he recognizes that he's not part of the party anymore, and he dries his tears and he comes and sits down with you and he behaves. Now, the exception to that, of course, and I'm going to take it away from the realm of parenting here, is when you have that rogue actor who's breaking the law and who's not simply having a temper tantrum, but who is doing things that are illegal. And in that case, I'm a big believer in not looking away, which is one of the things that in America we have tended to do when our leaders have broken rules. Like Nixon, for example, we give them pardons, or we, with Iran-Contra, lots of people got pardons. We tend to say, oh, we don't want to deal with that. But here's the problem with that, and this, again, maybe I will go back to parenting, although in that case it's not criminal. You got to stop that stuff in the bud. The problem is, if you probably didn't follow me, most of you back then, but when Trump was first in office, I kept saying, you cannot let the little stuff go because he's always going to escalate it. You must stop it. You must say to a kid, hey, no, you can't, take off your shoes in the grocery store, because pretty soon he's going to be taking off all his clothes. You say, you tie those shoes back up and you say, no, this is how we do it here. And he knows, oh, I can't do that. But Trump has always been one to push the envelope, to say, oh, I got away with that. What can I get away with next? And it's not that he won't stop, it's that he can't stop. A personality like that can't stop until he is stopped. And so one of the things that is really upsetting me now when I look at the way people are talking about the incoming administration is people are already saying, oh, they should forgive all the crimes that happened under the Trump administration. And I am a gazillion times against that, not because I ever expect to see Donald Trump necessarily indicted, although I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like, or put in jail. The man is 70-something years old. He will drag out any lawsuits a very long time. I don't expect any of that to happen. But I do expect that there's going to be somebody, probably in the not too far distant future, who's going to try and pull the same stuff that Trump and his administration have pulled. And they better know that it's going to be against the law, because that will nip that in the bud. So I really feel strongly that this whole idea of sort of singing kumbaya and shaking hands is not about justice. And it's about, it in a way sort of continues the abuse that is, when people say, oh, forgive them. Well, nobody's asked for forgiveness. And what we're really looking for, what I'm looking for, is equality before the law. And if you give a pass to somebody who has flagrantly broken the law, and mind you, I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not saying anybody's flagrantly broken the law, but if they have, and we let that go, what we're saying to all the people who followed the law is that they're not really quite as good as the person who broke the law. And again, if you've been a teacher, you know you can't do that. You can't give special favors to one student because that's screwing over the other 29. So that's another thing that's been on the table. I wanted a couple more things to, people asked about, what else would be here? All right, so let me go with this for now anyway. People have asked, what about all the stuff that Trump is doing right now? The things called midnight regulations, for example, or midnight appointments. Those happen with every administration. They are generally regulatory. They can be good, they can be bad. Generally, they're bad no matter who does them because they're not, I shouldn't say bad. Generally, they're not as well thought out as anything else is. What you really look for is things that cannot be reversed. And that Trump has done some things of late that look like they're going to be bad in the long term. That is, he's opened up a lot, to my mind, opened up a lot of land for drilling and things. But if you've noticed, nobody's jumping on that because they're very concerned they're going to get themselves in over their heads. And that's not going to end up being a good thing for their companies because they're really iffy about what Trump is how much his style of life is going to be, or style of governance is going to maintain in the country. And that's one of the things also that Biden said today that was really, I thought, great. And that is that, Trump looks pathetic by refusing to acknowledge this. I mean, this was a moment to try and be magnanimous, even if you don't feel it, to try and pretend that you're a statesman, especially with leaders all over the world calling Biden to congratulate him. Trump it just looks like a spoiled child. So, that's the other thing I was going to say. People have asked me a lot about the app Parlay, and that is a different kind of app that's kind of like a mix of Twitter and Facebook and a bunch of things, and it claims not to censor anybody. So the conservatives, and I hate that word for them, the movement conservatives, the Republicans, the Trumpers, have flocked to it lately. But they never stay out there by themselves because they really want they're like the 3-year-olds. They want the interaction, and that platform isn't terribly good anyway. And as they're about to discover, there in fact are guidelines around that platform, but they are not guidelines based in race, for example. So you can be a vicious racist, but what you can't do is do things like share pornography. So it's not this free world thing at all. It's much more sort of a right-wing political network. And for all that the leaders are saying, we all belong over here, they're all coming back to Twitter. And what's interesting is the one person who really is using it is, I always get his name wrong, Dan Bongino, is that it? He is a big Parlay guy, and it's basically a major place where he advertises. So this brings me full circle as to going forward. I would suggest that you don't let Trump live in your head any longer. It's time for this country to move forward. And I'm not saying don't be worried, because he's pulling all kinds of crap, and by all means speak up about it. But one of the reasons I think that this attempted coup, and I do think you can at least call it that, will not succeed is because so many of us have called it out and said, don't you even think about it, the same way you would say to a 3-year-old, no, there is no way you are going to get away with taking your clothes off and running through, the cereal aisle. That's simply not going to happen. And you guys, I can just feel that you guys all know exactly what I'm talking about there. So by all means, speak up about it. But the real question now is, I think, is reclaiming it. Think about it almost like this is when, if you think of him as an abuser, this is the dangerous moment. We have broken free and he wants us back. And when you say, no, I'm taking back my country, I'm taking back my power, you can't have it, you can't live in my head any longer, and you move forward, we actually do have control over our country. And that brings up the next question going forward. If we look into the future, into things that I would like to see happen, I I think we really do have to do something to restore some sort of a fairness doctrine to our public discourse. And the fairness doctrine came out of a moment much like this one, where the media was so divided that we ended up in a war, essentially, because two newspapers were both searching for what we would now call clickbait. And we came up with the idea in the early 20th century of an independent press that did not embrace fictional realities, that actually tried to be an independent press. And from that, we got, with the rise of radio, the idea that if you, in fact, were going to serve the public, and then, of course, you needed a charter from the government, which you don't need any longer because of cable and because of the internet, but we could find a way around that, I'm sure, that you had to guarantee that you were, in fact, serving the public interest by being fact-based and by presenting issues fairly and by presenting both sides of an issue. And that would go a really long way to restoring, I think, some sense of political fairness in this country, and to getting rid of the kind of crap you're seeing now, where you've got the president and a political party feeding their base things that are, quite frankly, lies. That would, if you think about the end of the fairness doctrine in 1987 under Ronald Reagan, right after that, that's when you get Rush Limbaugh. That's when you get talk radio. And in the 1990s, that's when you get the rise of the Fox News channel, which very recently in court, Sean Hannity's lawyers argued that nobody should take that seriously, that it was simply entertainment. And a judge who was appointed by Trump, by the way, said that's exactly true, that he couldn't be held liable for things he had said that people thought were true, because nobody actually thought Sean Hannity was telling the truth. He was simply a performance artist. All of that came from this moment when we got rid of the fairness doctrine. And I would like to see our discourse based again on fact, which is obviously what I try and do here in these talks, but even more so in the letters, which I really do. You might not notice this. I do go through them at the end of the night, and I comb out all the adverbs, and I try to comb out all the adjectives, and I try for my active verbs to be neutral. I certainly have strong opinions about this particular administration, because I don't believe that this administration has the interests of democracy at heart. I believe it's trying to create an oligarchy. But I firmly believe in the health of two political parties. And I try really to be even-handed between traditional republicanism, I'm the historian of it after all, and the Democratic Party. Because I'm really trying to restore the idea of a fact-based discourse again. And this ties into the Enlightenment and all sorts of things. But I wanted to end not there today, but with something else, and about fact-based and controlling the future. One of the things that has jumped out to me about the days since the election is that now 2 Republican governors have issued mask orders, mandatory masks in their states. Now, a week ago, they were all saying, the Republican governors, not the Republican governors so much, but the Republican Party was busily saying, because Larry Hogan doesn't fall into this, from Maryland, he's a Republican governor, we're all saying masks are all about politics, there's no problem with coronavirus, and on and on and on. Well, of course, our numbers are off the freaking charts. And the fact that Republican governors now feel the ability to walk away from that political moment of Trump politicizing this virus and saying, yeah, wear your, excuse me, damn mask, says to me that there is room to return to the idea of facts again, of fact-based inquiry. And that offers a lot of hope, I think. And I think it's actually really important. Now, and I want to leave on that note that the other news from yesterday that was astonishing was the idea that there is, in fact, the possibility of a vaccine for the coronavirus on the horizon. And that's just amazing. That is just amazing. But I wanted to say this. The numbers are really bad. The numbers of infections in this country are hideous. And our death rates have dropped slightly because we do understand better now how to care for people who have contracted COVID-19. But for a lot of people who haven't gotten it yet, especially those of us in rural areas, I think maybe we're getting lazy on this one, and it worries me terribly if you look at the numbers. So I do know that a lot of governors are concerned because the real spread of coronavirus now is not in places like supermarkets where we were all so concerned, or subways. The real spread is in small gatherings of family members, because you sit there and think, oh, my kid couldn't possibly have it. I've known him since he was born. He's fine. Your kid could have it. So I guess what I'm going to leave you with is, this is a struggle in my house. We're trying to figure out. I can't tell you how much I want to see my children and my friends and my family, my extended family. I have an extended family. We're very close, and I have not seen most of them since March, and it's killing me. But as my son was saying the other day, if they said to us we weren't going to have a solution for 8 years, I might just say screw it. I'm not going 8 years without seeing my sister. But we're so close. We're going into this period when everybody focuses on small gatherings with Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I guess I'm just going to leave you with kind of a plea, although it's not really my place to have a plea. But we're so close. If you can arrange your holidays in such a way that you just grit your teeth and say, just this one more holiday, I won't see my kids, won't see my sister, because I can see them in the spring. It probably would help a lot in making sure we get through what looks like it's going to be a really bad year for this coronavirus. And I wanted to end on the note that one of the things my son and I were saying was that it would be nice to figure out something to replace this holiday with. Instead of the family around the table, we're trying to brainstorm some way for the family to pitch in from our different places to create a new kind of holiday that doesn't involve the stupid Zoom app. And the laptop. And, we've thought about everybody pitching in something for food banks or whatever. I don't know what it looks like. It might be kind of fun if in the messages here people had suggestions, because I really don't know what that looks like. But I just feel like if we can get through this and make it into next spring, the whole country's going to look really, really different. Anyway, thanks for being here, and let's keep on going. Keep the faith, people. I hope that helped. People said they needed a pep talk. And I actually think that this is the last gasp of Trump trying to live in your head, and it's not going to be pretty. He's going to be messy for the next 2 months are going to be messy, but at the end of the day, this country is about us and the direction we want to take it, and we're really okay. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next Thursday if you want to come along midday, and otherwise next Tuesday, and I'll be writing to you tonight.